February 2013, Los Angeles burns. Police scanners scream through the night. Helicopters circle above the mountains, and every officer in California is hunting one man. A man who once wore the same badge, Christopher Dorner. Ex-LAPD officer, former Navy reservist. Now the most wanted man in America. He had sworn to protect and serve. But now he had declared war, not on civilians, not on strangers, but on the very institution he once served. In a 10,000-word manifesto posted online, Dorner wrote, "The department has not changed since the Rodney King days. The same corruption, the same lies. You can't fight evil with lies. To some, he was a murderer, a cold-blooded killer seeking revenge. To others, he was a symbol, a man crushed by a broken system, fighting back the only way he knew how. Over the next 9 days, California would descend into fear. Dozens of officers would be shot at. Families of police would hide in terror. And a manhunt unlike any in modern U.S. history would unfold, ending in a fiery standoff high in the mountains of Big Bear. This is not just a story about violence. It's about betrayal, rage, and the moment when a man loses everything, even himself. This is the last war of Christopher Dorner. He was born in 1979, a quiet boy with a strong sense of right and wrong. Christopher Jordan Dorner grew up in Southern California, a place where palm trees met police sirens, where justice was supposed to mean something. From a young age, he believed in rules, fairness, and integrity. His childhood friends said he hated bullies. Even as a kid, he would step between a victim and an aggressor, refusing to stand by in silence. That sense of righteousness would define his entire life. And ultimately, it would destroy him. Dorner's dream was to wear a uniform, to serve something greater than himself. He joined the U.S. Navy Reserve in 2002, working his way up with discipline and quiet pride. Those who served with him said he was polite, determined, and meticulous. He did everything by the book, one fellow reservist recalled. Almost too much. In the Navy, Dorner learned about structure, about duty, chain of command, and accountability. He believed that if you followed the rules, the system would protect you. That belief would later shatter into pieces. By 2005, Dorner had joined the Los Angeles Police Department. It was the realization of a lifelong dream. He had studied, trained, passed all the tests. He'd finally made it. The badge pinned to his chest wasn't just metal. It was identity. But within months, he began to see cracks in the image of the LAPD he had idealized. He saw officers joke about race. He saw brutality written off as necessary force. He saw what he called the code of silence, the unwritten law that a cop never reports another cop, no matter what happens. At first, Dorner kept quiet. He wanted to belong. He wanted to prove himself. But silence never sat well with him. In 2007, while training with a senior officer named Teresa Evans, Dorner claimed he witnessed her kick a mentally ill suspect in the face while he was already on the ground. Dorner reported the incident, officially, through internal channels. That was the moment his world began to collapse. Instead of being praised for honesty, he was branded a liar. His own department turned against him. The internal investigation concluded there was no evidence of misconduct. Evans denied everything. Her partner backed her up. Dorner stood alone. He was suspended, accused of filing a false report, a serious offense in the LAPD. In hearings, Dorner pleaded for truth. He brought witnesses, records, statements, but the Board of Rights, the department's internal court, decided he had fabricated the story. In 2008, Christopher Dorner was officially terminated from the Los Angeles Police Department. He appealed. He lost. He appealed again, all the way to the California courts, and lost once more. The system he had trusted, the one he had sworn to serve, had erased him. "I was fired for telling the truth," he later wrote. "The department taught me that integrity means nothing when it threatens power." His friends noticed the change immediately. The quiet, methodical man began to unravel. He spent years trying to clear his name, writing letters, calling lawyers, begging the courts to listen. Every rejection pushed him deeper into bitterness. He lived alone, without family, without children, and without purpose. The badge, once his pride, had become a scar. He watched news stories about officers caught lying or beating suspects and saw them walk free. He watched the same department he once defended cover itself in medals and press releases. He wrote, "When you lie on an officer, you're fired. When an officer lies on you, he gets promoted." In his mind, there was no justice left, only hypocrisy. By 2012, Dorner's frustration had turned into obsession. He reread his case files, his appeal transcripts, and the names of everyone who had testified against him. He memorized them. He moved frequently, spent time alone in the desert, practiced at shooting ranges. Former colleagues later said he had started to look military again. Short hair, tactical gear, precision in his movements. He still hoped to find peace, but the peace never came. In late 2012, Dorner began to write what he called his last confession. It would become known as the Dorner Manifesto, a long, rambling letter posted online in February 2013. In it, he named specific officers, supervisors, and public figures. He accused the LAPD of racism, corruption, and destroying his life. But it wasn't just anger. It was calculation. "This is a necessary evil," he wrote. "The department has suppressed the truth. The world will know my name." In his writing, Dorner described his dismissal as the final betrayal. He had lost his job, his reputation, his honor, and now he decided he would take back control by force. On February 3, 2013, in Irvine, California, the first victims were found. Monica Kwan, the daughter of a retired LAPD captain who had represented Dorner in his disciplinary case, and her fiancé, Keith Lawrence, were shot to death in their car. Detectives quickly connected the murders to Dorner's manifesto, which had been posted online that same weekend. In it, Dorner had named Captain Kwan directly, accusing him of failing to defend him years earlier. "Your name means nothing," he wrote. "You're part of the system that betrayed me." The killing sent shockwaves through the city. LAPD went on tactical alert. Every officer, every precinct, every patrol car. Dorner was now officially a fugitive, armed, trained, and enraged. Over the next few days, reports flooded in from across Southern California. A blue pickup truck matching Dorner's vehicle was spotted in Corona, near Los Angeles. At 1:25 a.m. on February 7th, 2 LAPD officers were ambushed at a red light. One was shot and wounded. Minutes later in Riverside, another police car was attacked. Officer Michael Crane was killed instantly, his partner critically injured. The manhunt exploded. Hundreds of officers deployed. SWAT teams patrolled highways. Helicopters swept through mountain roads. In their panic, police even opened fire on innocent civilians. 2 women delivering newspapers in a blue Toyota Tacoma were riddled with bullets after being mistaken for Dorner. Public fear turned to chaos. Los Angeles was under siege, not from terrorists, but from one of its own. Dorner, meanwhile, moved like a ghost. He knew police tactics, radio codes, and search patterns. He switched license plates, traveled through back roads, and used his military survival training to stay ahead of the hunt. He left behind messages, burned vehicles, empty shells, and chilling hints of his next moves. He called it asymmetrical warfare. "I know your playbook," he wrote. "I used to be one of you." At this stage, Dorner's story began to fracture public opinion. Some saw him as a deranged killer. Others, especially on social media, began to treat him as a kind of anti-hero, a man who had snapped after years of systemic abuse. Twitter and Facebook lit up with posts, "He's doing what nobody else dares." Of course, those weren't voices of approval. They were voices of shock, confusion, moral grayness. Because in Dorner's war, nobody could tell where justice ended and madness began. By February 8th, Dorner had vanished into the snow-covered mountains near Big Bear Lake. His burned-out truck was found on a forest road. Inside, police gear, weapons, and camping equipment. The search shifted to the wilderness. Hundreds of officers combed through cabins and ski lodges while blizzards swept the area. News helicopters broadcast live updates. Schools closed. Posters with Dorner's face, black and white. Bold letters "Wanted" appeared across the entire West Coast. The LAPD offered a $1 million reward, the largest in its history. But Dorner wasn't running anymore. He was waiting. Those who knew him could no longer recognize the man in the headlines. The Christopher Dorner they remembered, the polite, soft-spoken officer, had been consumed by rage. In his mind, every bullet was a message to the system that destroyed him. "Self-preservation is no longer important," he wrote. "I'm not afraid to die. What I'm afraid of is dying without the truth being told." In the coming days, that belief, That twisted sense of justice would lead him to the final confrontation in a mountain cabin, surrounded by hundreds of officers, live on television. But before the fire and the gunfire, before the final shot, there was still one thing driving him. Not hatred, but the desperate need to be heard, and that was what made Christopher Dorner truly dangerous. The morning of February 7, 2013, began like any other day in Los Angeles. Gray skies, distant sirens, a city already accustomed to noise and chaos. But before dawn broke, those sirens would become something else entirely. They would become the soundtrack of fear. Christopher Dorner had declared war. It started in the early hours. Around 1:20 a.m., a call went out across police radios. Shots fired. Officer down. 2 LAPD officers were ambushed at a traffic light in Corona. Bullets shattered glass, tore through metal. One officer was grazed in the head, the other thrown out of the line of fire. The shooter disappeared into the dark. Minutes later, Riverside. Another set of officers sitting in their patrol car. No warning. A burst of gunfire. Officer Michael Crane, a father of 2, killed instantly. His partner critically wounded. By sunrise, the city understood. Dorner wasn't hiding. He was hunting. Every police frequency lit up with panic. Officers were told to guard their families. Names mentioned in the manifesto were placed under protection. Homes of commanders were watched by armed patrols. LAPD Chief Charlie Beck addressed the public with trembling urgency. This is an extraordinary situation. He knows our tactics, our equipment, our people. He is extremely dangerous. In the hours that followed, the city turned into a battlefield without front lines. Across Southern California, nearly 10,000 police officers went on alert. Roadblocks appeared at freeway exits. Helicopters crisscrossed the skies. Residents were urged to stay indoors. And in the midst of that fear, something almost surreal happened. Officers began shooting at shadows. At 5:30 a.m. in Torrance, 2 Latina women delivering newspapers in a blue Toyota Tacoma were fired upon by police, more than 100 rounds. The women were 71 and 47 years old. Their truck had been mistaken for Dorner's. Moments later, in another Torrance neighborhood, another man driving a dark pickup was also shot at by police. He was white. He was unarmed, no warning, no questions, just fear. The message was clear. The hunter had made the hunters afraid. Meanwhile, Dorner moved with precision. He wasn't acting out of impulse. He was executing a plan. According to later investigations, he had scouted multiple routes, stockpiled weapons, and memorized radio codes. He used the same discipline he'd learned in the Navy and LAPD, but now against them. He switched license plates, changed cars, and traveled through side roads between Riverside and San Bernardino counties. He knew how long it would take before his burned truck would be found. He knew where they would search next, and he stayed one step ahead. His phone went dark. No credit cards, no signals. He had vanished into the maze. On social media, his manifesto began spreading like wildfire. The letter, posted on Facebook and copied across Reddit and news forums, was half confession, half declaration of war. He listed names of LAPD officers, claimed systemic racism, detailed corruption. He also listed politicians, celebrities, and journalists, praising some, condemning others. He wrote about gun control, military honor, and vengeance. He wrote about his mother, his lost pride, and his loneliness. "I never lied," he wrote. "They did. They destroyed my name. I'm not crazy. I'm the result of their actions." The internet exploded with opinions. Some called him a domestic terrorist. Others called him a whistleblower gone mad. A few, disturbingly, called him a hero. Meme pages appeared overnight. One image showed his face with the caption, "When the system fails you, you become the system's nightmare." For the LAPD, it was a PR catastrophe. For Dorner, it was validation. The world was finally listening. While Los Angeles trembled, Dorner fled east toward the mountains. His Nissan Titan truck was spotted near Big Bear Lake, a quiet ski town 2 hours away. By February 7th afternoon, smoke rose through the trees. A burned truck, snow-covered, still smoldering. Inside, tactical gear, weapons, camping food, and a few police uniforms. But no body. He had abandoned the vehicle, covered his tracks, and vanished into the wilderness. The mountains became his fortress. For the next several days, the largest manhunt in California's history consumed the state. Over 400 officers, SWAT teams, federal agents, U.S. Marshals, and military helicopters searched the forests. They went cabin to cabin, through snow and freezing winds. Local residents were told to lock doors and stay off the roads. TV stations broadcast live images of checkpoints, road closures, and heavily armed patrols. Every channel repeated the same photo. Dorner's face, calm, expressionless, cropped from his LAPD ID. The caption read, "Armed and extremely dangerous." To some, it looked like a mugshot. To others, it looked like a man staring directly into the soul of the institution that had betrayed him. Night after night, Dorner stayed ahead. He broke into cabins for food. He took refuge in empty vacation homes. He tuned into police radios, listening as they hunted him. They were his former brothers, his training partners, his superiors. Now they were prey. He scribbled notes, moved in silence, kept low. In his mind, this was not chaos, it was order. Every bullet fired by police at civilians, every mistake, every panicked press conference only proved his point. "You call me the enemy," he wrote, "but I was made by your hands." As the days passed, fear became fatigue. The media began turning the manhunt into spectacle. News helicopters followed police convoys. Talk shows debated his motives. The reward for his capture rose to $1 million, and in homes across California, people whispered about him. Was he still alive? How did he vanish? Could one man really outsmart thousands? The answer was yes, for now. But Dorner was not a ghost. He was human, cold, hungry, exhausted. By February 9th, snowstorms swept the area, burying trails and freezing rivers. Authorities believed he might have died in the wilderness. They began scaling back the search. Yet, deep inside an abandoned cabin near Big Bear, Dorner was alive, watching, waiting, writing. He read the headlines. He heard the public's confusion, the debate over whether he was evil or righteous. And somewhere inside that fractured mind, he began to believe he had become something larger than himself, a symbol of vengeance, of rebellion, of justice twisted by pain. He wrote again, "I didn't start this war. I'm ending it." The next sign of him came suddenly. February 10th, a couple returning to their cabin near Big Bear found the door forced open. Inside there were signs of someone living there. Food wrappers, footprints, blankets. Moments later, as they tried to flee, Dorner appeared. He tied them up, stole their car, and disappeared down the mountain roads. Within hours, police received reports of a carjacking near Highway 38. The chase was back on. At 12:30 p.m., February 12th, 2 San Bernardino County deputies spotted the stolen vehicle. A firefight erupted near Seven Oaks Mountain Road. One deputy, Jeremiah McKay, was fatally shot. Another wounded. Dorner retreated to a nearby cabin, the final battleground. For hours, gunfire echoed through the forest. Police surrounded the cabin hundreds of yards away, pinned behind trees and vehicles. Snipers watched through scopes. The scene played live on national television. Millions of viewers witnessing the end unfold in real time. "Enough!" Dorner shouted from inside, according to police reports. "You know what this is. You know why this happened." Then, smoke, a flash. The cabin was on fire. As the flames consumed the house, the sound of gunfire faded. A single shot rang out from inside. Moments later, silence. By nightfall, all that remained was a skeleton of a cabin, glowing embers in the snow. Inside, investigators found a burned body beside a gun. Dental records confirmed Christopher Dorner was dead. The war was over. But the questions had just begun. How did one man manage to terrify the most powerful police force in America? How did a decorated officer turn into a killer? And what does it say about the system he fought against, or the one that created him? The LAPD called him a monster. His supporters called him a martyr. His victims' families called him what he was, a murderer. But even his enemies admitted something unsettling. He exposed cracks in a system that had long pretended to be unbreakable. In the days that followed, the LAPD reopened old cases promising reform. Chief Beck publicly stated, "We will re-examine the allegations that Dorner made." But to many, it was too late. 4 people were dead, dozens traumatized, a city scarred, and the man at the center of it all, a former cop, had become both warning and legend. "When you push a man beyond his limit," a journalist later wrote, "he either breaks or he becomes something unrecognizable. Christopher Dorner had become the latter. He wasn't just a criminal, or a soldier, or a symbol. He was a mirror, reflecting everything the city wanted to ignore. And in that reflection, Los Angeles saw the truth, that justice, like fire, burns everyone it touches. The fire had not yet started. The snow was falling thick over Big Bear Lake. The air was thin, the kind that bites the lungs and dulls every sound. Somewhere inside that frozen wilderness, Christopher Dorner was still alive. For 9 days, California had been chasing a ghost. Roadblocks, helicopters, canine units as nothing. He had vanished into white silence. He knew these mountains. He had hiked them before, years earlier, when life still made sense. Back then, Big Bear was a place of peace. Ski slopes, cabins, families laughing near fireplaces. Now it was his bunker. Dorner chose the spot carefully. High ground, dense pines, few trails. From the ridge he could see the tiny flashes of police searchlights sweeping below like restless fireflies. He moved only at night, leaving no footprints on packed snow, wiping what little he made with a pine branch. He had food, ammunition, a police radios, and time. "I'm not running," he wrote in a small notebook he carried. "I'm observing. The truth moves slower than bullets." That notebook would never be found. But investigators later discovered fragments of pages half-burned inside the cabin. Inside his temporary shelter, a deserted vacation home, he lived like a soldier in the field. Cans of soup heated on a camping stove, boots drying near the fireplace, pistol within reach. He watched TV through a neighbor's window using binoculars. The news spoke only of him. He saw Chief Beck's press conference. He saw officers patrolling neighborhoods where their own wives and children slept behind drawn curtains. He saw the 2 women shot in Torrance by mistake. Each broadcast fed the story he wanted the world to see. Fear, confusion, power turned against itself. "They call me a madman," he muttered. But who fired at civilians? Who spreads panic now? Every newscast was proof that his message had landed. Every apology from the department sounded like confession. Still, isolation does not forgive the mind. Nights stretched into endless dark hours. Wind howled through the chimney, making the cabin groan like a living thing. He began to talk to himself, quietly at first, then louder, like he was rehearsing a speech to someone who'd betrayed him. Sometimes he spoke to his mother. Sometimes to Teresa Evans, the officer he had accused years ago. Sometimes to God. "You gave me conscience," he whispered one night, staring at the rifle laid across his knees, "and they punished me for using it." The snow kept falling, covering everything he had done, as if the mountains themselves were trying to erase him. Meanwhile, the world below was divided. Television pundits analyzed his manifesto line by line. Was he delusional, or had the LAPD truly broken him? Forums filled with endless threads. Is Dorner a product of the system? Corruption made a killer. Monster or martyr? Some quoted his lines like scripture. The department hasn't changed since Rodney King. Others posted pictures of the victims, reminding the internet that behind his rage were graves. Yet for Dorner, those digital debates were confirmation he was being heard. For the first time in years, his name was louder than theirs. He wasn't careless. He was methodical. He rotated cabins every couple of nights, taking what he needed and locking the rest. He kept the fires small, just enough to melt snow for water. He cleaned his weapons, checked his maps, and studied police frequencies. He could hear the search teams. Static coordinates, voices calling his name. Sometimes he recognized them. Men he'd once worked beside. He wrote their names down in the snow, then brushed them away. They would never look here, he thought. They think like police. I think like prey that remembers the hunter's footsteps. But the truth was different. He was tired. His hands shook from cold. His rations were running out. The calm precision was giving way to something raw, a creeping awareness that the story could only end one way. He imagined how the news would frame it. Disgraced officer killed in shootout. They would never print his truth. Unless he made them. In those final days, Dorner's writings shifted from accusations to legacy. He wrote about America's obsession with violence, about police who feared accountability, about citizens who accepted injustice because it was convenient. "If I die," he wrote, "let them at least look at the mirror I've cracked." He quoted military creeds, moral codes, Bible verses, His thoughts jumped between discipline and despair, between clarity and chaos. The longer he stayed hidden, the more mythic he became, to the media, to strangers, and to himself. February 9th. A storm swept through the San Bernardino Mountains. Snow drifts 6 feet high. Roads closed. Searchers believed he might have perished. Some officers were recalled to Los Angeles, but Dorner wasn't dead. He was watching the rescue convoys leave the mountain. For the first time, he felt a strange relief. They were giving up. He stood outside the cabin, snow up to his knees, and listened to the absolute silence of the forest. No engines, no radios. Just wind through pines and the faraway creak of ice. He realized he had achieved the impossible. He had made the world stop and listen. Yet standing there, he also realized something else. No amount of attention could give him back his name. That night, he dreamed of the academy, of the day he first received his badge. He woke sweating, heart racing, whispering the old LAPD motto, to protect and to serve. It felt like mockery now. He looked at his reflection in the frost-covered window. The beard, the hollow eyes, the shaking hands. He didn't see an officer anymore. He saw the monster they said he was becoming. Maybe they're right, he said aloud. Maybe this is what justice looks like when it loses its way. He sat down, loaded his pistol, and stared at it for a long time. Then he unloaded it, exhaled, and said quietly, "Not yet." February 10th. A knock at the door. He froze. It wasn't police, just a couple returning to their vacation cabin. Panic surged through him. He pointed his weapon, ordered them inside. They begged, terrified. He told them he wouldn't hurt them. He tied them with zip ties, took their keys, and said, "This isn't about you. It's about them." Before leaving, he placed a blanket over them, a strange echo of the decency he once lived by. He stole their white Nissan Rogue and drove down the winding mountain road, snow spraying beneath the tires. He knew it was over. The moment he left the mountain, the hunt would resume. He turned on the radio. Every station talked about him. He smiled, a thin, exhausted smile. "They'll remember me," he whispered, one way or another. By midday, police had the alert. Stolen SUV, suspect Dorner possible. Roadblocks formed again. Helicopters roared back into the sky. He tried to stay hidden among the cabins near Seven Oaks. When deputies spotted him, the chase began. Gunfire echoed through the trees. Bullets shattered branches. Snow erupted in white plumes. He fired back with calm precision. Years of training took over, but it wasn't a battle anymore. It was ritual, the last act in a play he'd already written. A bullet struck a deputy. Another fell seconds later. The surviving officers pulled back, calling for reinforcements. Dorner ran toward a small wooden cabin, the final one. Inside, he barricaded doors with furniture, loaded his rifles, checked his radio. Outside, hundreds surrounded him. Through a megaphone came the order, "Christopher Dorner. Come out with your hands up!" He laughed once, a broken sound. "No," he shouted back. "You come in." Inside, he could hear them setting up tear gas launchers. The cabin creaked as shells smashed through windows. Smoke filled the room. He coughed, blinking, eyes burning. For a moment, he thought of surrendering, to step out, to speak one last truth. But then he remembered the hearing room years ago, the laughter, the lies, the faces turning away. There would be no justice waiting outside. "You made me," he whispered. "Now watch what you've made." He fired through the window. The police returned fire. The standoff thundered through the valley, carried live by every television network in America. Reporters whispered into microphones, "Gunfire continues." Smoke rising from the structure. Viewers sat frozen, watching history burn in real time. As flames climbed the cabin walls, Dorner crawled to the corner near the window. The heat shimmered. He could hear ammunition popping in the fire. He took out his pistol, the same weapon issued by the LAPD years before. He looked at it almost tenderly. "End of watch," he murmured. A single shot. Silence. Outside, officers waited until the roof collapsed. They didn't rush in. They knew. By nightfall, only ashes remained, glowing against the snow. The official report said the fire had started when tear gas canisters ignited the cabin. Others claimed he set it himself. No one truly knows. What mattered was that the ghost in the mountains was gone. But even in death, Dorner's shadow lingered. The LAPD faced public outrage. Not sympathy for him, but anger at the fear, the confusion, the mistakes that revealed a deeper sickness. The city held its breath, wondering what had been avenged and what had been lost. In the quiet that followed, the mountains returned to silence. Snow melted. Cabins were repaired. Tourists came back. But those who had searched for him never forgot the feeling of being hunted by one of their own. One deputy later said, "We were chasing a ghost, but the ghost was chasing us too." Christopher Dorner's story ended in fire and snow, but his echo remained, a warning written in gunpowder and guilt. He had become a question without an answer. Can justice survive inside a system built on fear? And when a man loses faith in that system, what remains of his soul? For 9 days, California looked into that abyss, and the abyss, wearing a badge and a rifle, looked back. The morning after Dorner's death, Los Angeles woke to the sound of helicopters once again. But this time, they weren't searching. They were recording. Reporters stood in front of blackened ruins, microphones trembling in the cold wind. Behind them, the charred remains of the cabin smoldered like an open wound. The anchors called it the end of a nightmare. But for many, it felt like something far more complicated. Not an ending, but an awakening. The LAPD had won the manhunt. But had it won the argument? Chief Charlie Beck held a press conference that afternoon. He looked tired, hollow-eyed, his words carefully chosen. "This was a tragedy," he said. "We've lost officers and innocent lives have been taken. But the department will not be defined by one man's acts of violence." Yet almost immediately, reporters asked the question he feared most. What about Dorner's claims? The racism, the corruption, the code of silence? For a moment, Beck hesitated. Then he gave an answer no one expected. "We will review his allegations," he said. "Not because we believe them, but because we must show transparency." The statement was meant to close the wound. Instead, it ripped it wider. Social media exploded again. Twitter hashtags trended for days. Your Dorner, LAPD, your Justice Burns. In coffee shops, classrooms, police stations, people argued, who was Dorner really? To some, he was a murderer hiding behind moral excuses. To others, he was the dark reflection of everything wrong with authority. And to a few, disturbingly many, he was something close to a folk anti-hero, a ghost of revenge haunting the powerful. In South Central Los Angeles, where memories of Rodney King still lingered like smoke, murals began to appear. A painted face, black skin, stern eyes, the LAPD badge half melted beside it. Underneath, in spray paint, "Tell the truth, or it will tell itself." The city painted over the murals within days. But photos spread online, shared thousands of times. Even in death, Dorner refused to disappear. Meanwhile, inside the LAPD headquarters, the mood was silent and heavy. The men and women who had hunted him were now haunted by him. Some had lost colleagues. Some had shot at innocent civilians during the chaos. Some couldn't sleep, hearing the echoes of gunfire in their dreams. They had won the battle, but lost the illusion of control. An internal review team, formed hastily after Dorner's death, began re-examining his firing case. They reopened old files, reread testimonies, listened to recordings. The results were vague. Nothing could bring him back, or the people he killed. But in the margins of those files, they began to see patterns, inconsistencies, missing details. Quiet favoritism, whispers spread through the department. Maybe he wasn't entirely wrong. No one dared say it publicly. But it was there, an unspoken guilt that sat in the hallways like a ghost. Outside, life went on. Funerals were held. 4 coffins lowered into the ground, one for Officer Michael Crane, one for Deputy Jeremiah McKay, and 2 for Monica Kwan and Keith Lawrence, the young couple whose deaths had begun it all. At each funeral, cameras rolled. Flags folded. Bagpipes played. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the headlines and the mourning, people whispered the name Dorner like a curse or a confession. The media turned his story into spectacle. Talk shows dissected his manifesto. Documentaries promised to reveal the mind of a killer. Hollywood producers pitched screenplays within weeks. It was the perfect American tragedy. A hero turned monster, a system under fire, a city searching for redemption. But beneath the noise, something quieter began to happen, something deeper. Ordinary citizens started asking uncomfortable questions. If Dorner's allegations had even a grain of truth, How many others had been silenced? How many officers had been punished not for wrongdoing, but for speaking out? And if one man could terrify an entire police force, what did that say about their own fear of accountability? Community activists demanded public hearings. Civil rights groups reopened old cases of police brutality. The city council received hundreds of letters, angry, desperate, grieving. One of them read, "Dorner didn't start this fire." "You did. He just showed us the smoke. In Big Bear, tourists returned by spring." The cabin site was cleared, fenced off, then left to nature. But locals said the place still felt wrong, heavy, quiet, like the forest remembered. Rangers found spent shells buried in the dirt months later, small relics of violence now rusting under pine needles. They never found the bullet Dorner fired at himself. Sometimes hikers said they felt watched near the site. Sometimes they heard what sounded like radio static, though no signal reached that deep into the mountains. It was superstition, maybe, or maybe memory refusing to fade. Back in Los Angeles, the official Dorner Review report was released quietly in June 2013. It found no evidence of racial bias or corruption in the handling of Dorner's termination. But even that sentence sounded hollow. By then, the department's credibility was already cracked. The public had seen too much. The mistaken shootings, the fear, the panic. No report could unsee what California had witnessed. A police force brought to its knees by one of its own. "The fire consumed more than a man," wrote a columnist in the Los Angeles Times. "It consumed the myth that our protectors are infallible." For months, the LAPD launched community outreach programs, new transparency initiatives, listening sessions. But for every new reform, someone would whisper the same name, Dorner, as if testing whether the truth could still be spoken aloud. And somewhere, buried beneath the weight of headlines, were the words Dorner had written in his final days. "I know I will be vilified by every media outlet. But that's fine. Maybe my story will make one person stop and think before they lie. Maybe that's enough." No one knew whether those words were madness or prophecy. Maybe both. In the years that followed, the Dorner case became a study subject in police academies, criminology programs, and ethics seminars. Psychologists debated whether he suffered from paranoia or moral injury, the trauma that comes when one's values are betrayed by the very institution that taught them. They dissected his decisions, his tactics, his writings. They analyzed the psychology of vengeance, how righteousness can curdle into rage, how a man obsessed with justice can become an instrument of death. And always, at the center of those studies, lay the same haunting contradiction. He was both the victim and the perpetrator, both the whistleblower and the executioner, both the man who sought truth and the man who buried it in blood. By the 10th anniversary in 2023, most people had moved on. New scandals, new headlines, new fires. But for those who remembered, the name Christopher Dorner still carried the weight of an unanswered question. Was he evil? Or was he evidence? Was he what happens when a good man breaks? Or what happens when a system refuses to bend? The truth, perhaps, lived somewhere between the flames and the silence. That's where his story ends. Not with redemption, not with forgiveness, but with a warning, because in every city, in every department, in every system built on fear and pride, there is always another man like Dorner, waiting for his breaking point, waiting for the moment when silence becomes unbearable. "You can't fight evil with lies," he wrote once, "but you can burn it to the ground." In the decade since the fire in Big Bear, the smoke has cleared, but the questions still hang in the air. Not about how Christopher Dorner died, but about what his life revealed before the flames took it. Because some stories don't end when the last bullet is fired. They linger, in policy, in fear, in the uneasy space between justice and revenge. This is what remains of the man who declared war on his own badge. For most Americans, the name Christopher Dorner now lives somewhere between myth and memory. To the families of his victims, it is a wound that never fully closed. To law enforcement, it is a cautionary tale whispered in briefings. Remember what happens when one of us turns. And to a generation raised on distrust of government, of media, of power, it became something darker, a symbol of rebellion against corruption, even at the cost of morality itself. But before he became a ghost story, Dorner was a man, shaped by the same ideals the system claimed to uphold: honor, duty, truth. He believed in them so completely that when the world betrayed those values, he shattered, and in that fracture, the country caught a glimpse of its own reflection. Myths are born when reality can't explain a tragedy. And Dorner's myth began almost immediately after his death. Online forums turned his manifesto into digital scripture. Some read it like a confession. Others treated it like a prophecy. There were Reddit threads dissecting every paragraph, YouTube channels reciting his words over dramatic music, documentaries promising the truth they don't want you to know. They called him the cop who declared war, the Avenger in uniform, the Ghost of Los Angeles. Each title twisted his story a little more, away from the pain of real people and toward the theater of revolution, because that's what people do when they don't want to face the complexity of evil. They turn it into entertainment. But beyond the myth, there was the man, one whose name now haunts police ethics courses and psychology journals. In 2014, the LAPD's internal reforms began quietly referencing the Dorner precedent, a reminder that silencing dissent could be deadly. New whistleblower protections were drafted. Officers were encouraged, at least on paper, to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. It was progress, perhaps, but it came written in blood. Every generation has its mirror moment, a time when the mask of authority slips. For Los Angeles, that moment came not just from Dorner's crimes, but from the panic they exposed. The city had seen fear before, riots, earthquakes, wildfires, but nothing like this. An entire police force, thousands strong, terrified of one of their own. They shot at civilians. They barricaded neighborhoods. They broadcast their fear across the world. And when people saw that, they began to ask a question that no department wants to hear. If the Guardians panic, who protects the city? Dorner's war wasn't only physical, it was psychological. He forced a system built on confidence to confront its own vulnerability. They created me, he had written. Now they have to face me. He was wrong in his methods, monstrously wrong, but the reflection he left behind could not be unseen. After his death, silence became its own kind of policy. The LAPD rarely spoke his name in public. Academy instructors skipped his case during recruit training. To mention him was to give him power. But silence is also a kind of confession. In precinct lunchrooms, officers still whispered stories, how the manhunt changed their idea of safety, how the public's sympathy, however small, cut deeper than any bullet, how they felt ashamed of the chaos that his name unleashed. Many veterans left the force within a year. Some said the job felt heavier, darker. One officer said, "We stopped trusting each other for a while." Every look felt like a question. Could that be the next Dorner? That was his final victory. Not his violence, but the doubt he planted in their ranks. For those who buried loved ones, there was no victory. Only the endless echo of a headline. Monica Kwan's parents refused interviews. Her father, the retired LAPD captain Dorner had once admired, withdrew from public life. He had defended Dorner years earlier at the hearing, and still became the reason for his rage. There are ironies so cruel that even time refuses to soften them. Officer Crane's children grew up with folded flags and glass frames. Deputy McKay's widow still attends memorial ceremonies each February. They never spoke Dorner's name. They didn't have to. The silence said enough. Because while the internet argued about justice, they lived with the cost of his version of it. If there is one, it lies buried beneath the noise, in the contradiction that defined his life. Christopher Dorner believed in justice so deeply that he destroyed it. He demanded accountability from others while refusing it for himself. He became what he hated, believing it would prove him right. And in doing so, he turned a noble idea, truth, into a weapon. History is full of such men. Men who believe that righteousness gives them the right to decide who deserves to live. Men who confuse moral clarity with moral superiority. Dorner's tragedy is not that he was evil. It's that he started from something good, a desire for fairness, and let it rot into vengeance. Self-preservation is no longer important, he wrote. I'm not afraid to die. What I'm afraid of is dying without the truth being told. He died anyway, and the truth still remains divided. Pieces scattered between his words and his victims' graves. In the years after, Los Angeles tried to move on. New scandals came and went, police shootings, protests, politics. But every time another officer was caught lying, another video surfaced of brutality. Another press conference promised reform. His name resurfaced, whispered like a warning, "Don't let another Dorner happen." And yet, the pattern continued. Because the problem was never one man. It was the culture that made silence safer than honesty. Maybe that's why, even now, people still debate whether he was mad or prophetic. Because the line between those two things, madness and prophecy, often looks the same until it's too late. In 2020, during nationwide protests against police violence, posters appeared again, a black silhouette half in uniform, half in flames. Underneath, 3 words, "The Broken Badge." No one claimed responsibility for the design. It spread online, then vanished as quickly as it came. But for a moment, the ghost of 2013 flickered back into public memory. What does it mean to serve justice? Is it loyalty to the system or loyalty to the truth, even when they're not the same thing? That's the question Dorner left behind. It echoes through courtrooms, classrooms, precincts, through every place where power meets conscience. He forced a conversation that no one wanted, and he paid for it with every life he touched, including his own. Perhaps that's why his story still unsettles us. Because deep down, everyone recognizes the same potential inside themselves. The moment when disappointment turns into fury, when belief curdles into obsession, when the desire to be heard becomes louder than the value of what's said, that is the edge he crossed. And once crossed, there is no return. In the end, Dorner's legacy isn't measured in bullets or headlines. It's measured in silence, the uneasy kind that follows whenever someone mentions his name. It's measured in the nervous glance between 2 officers when one says, "If you see something wrong, speak up," and the other remembers what happened to the last man who did. It's measured in the quiet reforms that no one celebrates because they came too late. If you drive through Big Bear today, you won't find a memorial. The cabin site is gone, reclaimed by snow and pine. But if you stop there, in the early morning when the mist still hangs over the trees, you can feel a strange stillness, not peace exactly, but the echo of unfinished business. The echo of a man who tried to expose darkness and instead became part of it. The echo of a system that still struggles to tell the difference between loyalty and justice. The echo of a question that has no clean answer. What happens when the protector becomes the threat, and the threat becomes the mirror? "Every system has a breaking point," Dorner once wrote. "I just happen to be mine."